I always knew my wife Lisa had a thing for astrology. At first it was kind of cute, the way she'd read my horoscope out loud every morning, acting like the stars had personally written a memo just for me. But over the years, it became more. It started with Mercury Retrograde. Apparently, when that planet started moving backward, or whatever it was, Lisa swore it messed everything up. Emails got lost, phones crashed, and worst of all, according to her, relationships fell apart. "Don't sign any contracts today, Dave," she yelled one morning as I was about to leave for work. She was still in her pajamas, scrolling on her phone and sipping coffee from a mug that said, "What's your rising sign?" "Lisa, it's a lease extension," I said, grabbing my keys. "I've been renting this office for 3 years already. It's not exactly uncharted territory." "You're tempting fate," she muttered. But I kissed her forehead anyway and left. Lisa wasn't just into astrology. She was obsessed. I'd come home from work to find tarot cards spread across the coffee table, candles burning, and crystals soaking in bowls of moon water. She'd give me advice about my career based on the moon phase and insisted we rearrange the furniture to balance the energies in the house. Most of the time, I just smiled and let it slide. After all, Lisa had always been a dreamer, and I loved that about her. But the more she leaned into this cosmic lifestyle, the more I started to feel distant, like we were living in 2 different worlds. Then came him. It started on a regular Saturday. I was busy fixing the sink that wouldn't stop dripping, and Lisa said she was heading to the bookstore. Nothing unusual. She loved browsing books about astrology and spirituality, so I didn't think much of it, until she started going every weekend. One night she came home glowing, carrying a bag filled with books, candles, and what looked like a pouch of rocks. "Look what I got," she said, dumping her haul on the dining table. "More crystals?" I asked. "Not just crystals. These are healing stones. And Kyle says they're really powerful." "Kyle?" Her cheeks flushed. "Oh, he's just this guy I met at the bookstore. He works in the esoteric section and does readings. Super knowledgeable about astrology. He told me Mercury's about to go retrograde again, and I need to be extra careful with my relationships." I tried to ignore the way she said his name, like he was some kind of mystic prophet instead of a guy who probably reeked of patchouli. But over the next few weeks, Kyle became a regular part of her conversations. "Kyle says I should avoid making big decisions this month. Kyle says this stone is perfect for clearing negative energy. Kyle says. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, especially over some guy who probably wore sandals in the winter. But something about the way Lisa looked when she talked about him, the sparkle in her eye, the excitement in her voice, made my stomach churn. Kyle had convinced Lisa that Mercury retrograde wasn't just coming, it was coming for me. He told her that I was practically destined to cheat on her and that the stars had already laid out my betrayal. According to him, the only way to stop it was to perform a ritual in advance and seal our relationship's energy. When Lisa told me this, she was shaking. Her voice cracked as she demanded to know how I could even think about doing something like that to her. She cried, she yelled, and she paced the living room, refusing to calm down. I tried to reason with her. "Lisa, this is crazy. You're accusing me of something I haven't even done because some guy read it in the stars?" "You don't believe in anything," she shouted. "That's the problem. Kyle's right. You're closed off to the universe, and now it's trying to punish us." I couldn't take it anymore. My heart broke seeing her like this. So scared, so convinced that disaster was inevitable. So I agreed. "Fine," I said, gritting my teeth. "Do the ritual, whatever it takes to make you feel better." Relief washed over her face, but something didn't sit right with me, especially when she said the ritual had to take place at Kyle's house, in the evening, alone. I pretended to be okay with it. I kissed her goodbye and told her to call me when it was done. But as soon as she left, doubt clawed at my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When I walked into Kyle's apartment, the air was thick with incense and something heavier, something wrong. Candles flickered in a circle, casting eerie shadows against the walls, which were covered in strange symbols. Roses were scattered across the floor, their petals damp and darkened. Lisa stood in the center, draped in a thin robe that barely covered her. Her hair was loose, and symbols of men and women intertwined, were drawn around her. Kyle stood behind her, his hands hovering just above her shoulders as if guiding her through the ritual. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched. "Lisa!" I shouted. She turned, her eyes wide with panic. "Dave, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I snapped. "What the hell are you doing?" Kyle stepped forward, but I wasn't listening anymore. All I could see was my wife, the ritual, and the betrayal written all over the room. Lisa froze, guilt flashing across her face. Kyle stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "I knew you'd show up," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Typical behavior from someone like you." I clenched my fists, but he didn't stop. "You're controlling, closed off, and completely out of touch with what Lisa needs. That's why the universe is pushing her towards something better." I looked at Lisa, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, Kyle kept talking, his voice echoing through the candlelit room. "She's already moved on, Dave. According to the texts, the rituals, and the stars, Lisa has entered a new phase of life. She's performed a body fusion ceremony with me. We're twin flames now." Twin flames? The words hit me like a slap. I could feel my blood boiling, my pulse pounding in my ears. Kyle smirked. "Face it, Dave. You're not needed here anymore." Something inside me snapped. I didn't even register what happened next, but the look of shock on Kyle's face and the sound of him stumbling backward told me enough. Lisa gasped, her hands covering her mouth, but I didn't care. I spat toward her feet, turned around, and walked out the door. I drove aimlessly, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. My heart raced, and my thoughts spiraled in 1,000 directions. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved, trusted, ended up believing she was spiritually bound to some self-proclaimed guru? Images of the candles, the symbols, and Lisa standing there with Kyle flashed in my mind. My stomach churned, and I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to shake the vision. Was this the same woman who used to plan our future? Who used to laugh at cheesy rom-coms with me on lazy Sundays? A part of me wanted to turn around, drag her out of that apartment, and demand answers. But another part of me, the part that felt shattered, knew it was pointless. She had made her choice. Or had Kyle made it for her? I slammed the brakes at a red light and let out a shaky breath. The streetlights blurred as I blinked back, the anger and disbelief threatening to overwhelm me. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and lost all at once. My wife, my Lisa, had been swept up in something I couldn't even understand. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was how quickly she had doubted me, questioned my loyalty, and let someone else convince her I was the enemy. I pulled into the driveway and sat there, staring at the darkened house. It didn't feel like home anymore. Not with her gone. Not with everything we'd built crumbling in a single night. The days after that night passed in a haze. I went through the motions. Work, errands, pretending to be okay whenever someone asked. But inside, I felt hollow. Lisa sent me a text a few days later. "I need to talk." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I forgave her? That I understood? Because I didn't. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved her things into boxes, packed away the memories, and tried to find pieces of myself buried under the wreckage of our marriage. But late at night, when the house was quiet, her voice haunted me. The laughter we used to share, the little things she did that drove me crazy but also made me love her. That's what hurt the most. Not losing her, but losing us. I started therapy. It wasn't easy, but it helped. I learned to stop blaming myself for her choices and to recognize that I couldn't control the stars, or anyone else's beliefs about them. One night, while sorting through old photos, I found one of us from our first anniversary. She was smiling, holding my hand, her eyes full of trust. I almost threw it away, but instead, I put it in a drawer. Not because I wanted to hold on to the past, but because it reminded me of who I was before all of this. And I wasn't ready to lose him.